All right, let's jump right in. When you hear Easter Island, what comes to mind? Probably those giant, mysterious stone heads, right? But what we're talking about today isn't just a story about old statues. No, this is a living, breathing mystery that's still unfolding on one of the most remote places on the entire planet.
You know, for centuries, people from the outside world have been absolutely captivated. This French author from the 1800s, Pierre Loti, he really nailed the feeling. This idea of some lost, magnificent race that just vanished? Well, that's the kind of stuff that's been fueling our imagination from the moment outsiders first laid eyes on the island. And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? It's the one big question that has hooked everybody, from the first explorers to today's scientists. How on earth did a small group of people on this tiny little dot in the middle of a massive ocean build and move these gigantic statues? And maybe even more puzzling, what happened to them? That's the puzzle we're going to try to piece together.
Okay, first things first. To really wrap your head around this achievement, you have to understand the sheer, mind-blowing isolation of this place. I mean, it's not just remote. It is the very definition of remote.
Just try to picture this for a second. We're talking 2,000 miles of open ocean separating it from South America, the nearest continent. That is just a vast, empty expanse of water.
And if you look the other way, well, it's another 1,100 miles just to find the next group of people on Pitcairn Island. We're talking about a society that grew up in almost total solitude for 1,000 years. It's incredible.
So you can imagine, when Europeans, like the famous Captain Cook, show up in 1774, they are just stunned. They see this small population, no advanced tools to speak of, and they just can't connect the dots. They couldn't figure out how these people could be responsible for the massive engineering all around them. He literally wrote about how baffled he was. How could they possibly have done this?
So, of course, a mystery like that kicks off centuries of investigation. So let's look at how science has tried to crack this case, treating the island almost like a giant archaeological crime scene.
Now, you'd think the most basic questions would be settled by now, right? Well, not here. For starters, when did people even get here? Some clues point to a super early arrival, way back in the 1st century. But then other evidence suggests it was way, way later. The timeline itself is a total mystery.
And then there's the how. How did they even find this place? On one side of the coin, you have the theory of Polynesian master navigators. I mean, these were arguably the greatest sailors the world has ever seen, reading the stars and ocean currents like a highway map. But on the other side, you have to look at the odds. This island is just a tiny speck. Finding it feels next to impossible. Was it incredible skill, or just one of the luckiest accidents in human history?
So, here's the thing. Science has given us some incredible tools, for sure. We can analyze all kinds of physical evidence, but at the end of the day, it can't tell us everything. It can't tell us why they did it. It can't tell us about their beliefs, their motivations.
And this is where the story takes a really fascinating turn. What if we've all been looking in the wrong place? What if the real answers aren't just buried in the dirt, but are actually carried in the stories and the memories of the Rapa Nui people living there today?
So let's step away from the outside perspective for a moment and listen to the island's own story. For the Rapa Nui people, this isn't some academic puzzle. It's their foundation, a story passed down for generations, and it all revolves around one legendary figure. This is Benedicto Tuki. He's a master woodcarver on the island, and for him, this history is personal. He doesn't just tell the story, he is the story. He introduces himself as a direct descendant of the very first king, Hotumatua. It's his identity.
So, the legend goes, the story passed down to him from his grandmother, who was the last queen, that Hotumatua traveled from an island far to the west called Hiva, and he didn't come alone. He brought 7 different groups of people with him, and those groups would become the 7 tribes of Rapa Nui. It's their origin story.
And to really get this, we've got to learn a couple of keywords. The stone platforms the statues stand on, they're not just platforms, they are ahu. These are sacred foundations, connecting the people directly to their ancestors. And the statues themselves, those are the Moai. Super important here. They aren't gods. They're representations of powerful ancestors, of kings. They gaze over their descendants, offering protection and this spiritual power called mana.
And here is where it all just clicks together beautifully. Check this out. At this one site, Ahu Akivi, there are 7 Moai. Now, almost all the others face inland, watching over their villages. But not these 7. They stare west, out to sea.
And according to Benedicto Tucci's oral history, they're looking back toward their homeland, Hiva. It's a permanent stone reminder of that first journey. Amazing, right?
But this connection to the past isn't just a quaint story. Not at all. It's a powerful and sometimes really contentious force in the modern world. This history is alive and kicking, and it brings up a huge question. Who gets to be the guardian of this story?
So on the island today, you've got this real tension. For the Rapa Nui people, their history is a way to reclaim their identity. Families are making land claims based on these ancient tribal boundaries. At the same time, you have archaeologists who are worried that modern life, things like farming, could end up destroying these irreplaceable sites. And the Rapa Nui people themselves? They want control of their sacred park, arguing, hey, we've been the caretakers for 1,000 years.
And it all boils down to this incredibly profound question, one that an archaeologist who's worked on the island for decades posed. Who really owns the past? Is it the scientists who study it, the government that runs it, or the people whose ancestors actually created it?
Maybe the best answer comes from a former mayor on the island, Pito Edmonds. He says the Moai, they're not silent at all. They speak. They're a lesson from the ancestors, a spirit. And he insists the world needs to know that this spirit isn't gone. It's not a relic. It is still very, very much alive.
And that really leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? The story of Easter Island is about a culture fighting to make sure its past has a voice. And it makes you wonder, if the monuments and memories of our own history could speak, what lessons would they have for us? And more importantly, what story would we want them to tell?